What's up, guys?
It's Terry
and Rowan from ArtofSmartTV, and we're here with another episode of HSC Economics Review. Now, this is a pretty cool episode because, if I may say myself, we're going to be diving in and doing HSC Economic exams question predictions. So we're going to look into our sort of crystal ball and try to predict for you the topics, right, that we're expecting for both the short answer and the essays. And our hope is that it's going to help you prioritize your study, narrow down, focus on these key areas so that you're even more prepared for the HSC Economics exam. Now, before we dive into some of these predictions, a couple of things. First of all, Terry and I don't agree on all of them. Okay, now there's a bit of overlap, which was good to see, but we don't agree on all of them. So what we want to find out is, are you Team Terry with Terry's predictions? Okay, or are you Team Rowan with my predictions? Or do you think we've just completely screwed up, right? Yeah. And that you've got another set of predictions. So we'd love to hear them. Pop your comments down below. We want to know what you think is going to be in this HSC Economics exam. Now, a question, Terry, before we dive into the predictions, how have we thought about the predictions? Like, how is it even possible to make predictions for a HSC Economics exam?
Okay, so for HSC Economics, I know we're all about the data, right? We love our statistics, we love our trends, and that's exactly what Rowan and I have done. But we went about this individually, right? So Rowan went away, he did his own little analysis, I did my own little analysis, and I made some beautiful, beautiful sheets, right? Rowan's got his not as beautiful sheet.
Okay, there's no colour, that's true.
Right, and then I went past 10 years. Rowan, how far back did you go?
Yes, I went from 2008.
Oh, okay, great. So I went from 2009, and we just looked at what has been tested, and got a couple of little sweet little trends here. We looked at also what's been happening currently,
and that's an important point, right? Because the papers actually start getting written term 4, right? Yeah. Of so for next year's HSC, they'll start writing the paper next term, and then it gets finalised by June, July. So you've got a window, right, where the broader economic conditions they're gonna play on the mind of the examiners who are creating the exam in influencing what areas of the course they might think are going to give students a greater opportunity to showcase knowledge and also bring in real world examples. So what we look at is patterns, right? Are there patterns from the past sort of 10 plus years of data, and then also what was going on in the economy generally around the time of which the exam was being formed, right? So we've used those to shape our own independent, we did this independently, our own predictions, and now we're going to share these with you and see what your thoughts are. Yeah. So, Terry, I believe we're going to start with short answers, right? So, what are your picks, right? And I'd love to hear a little bit about why you picked these as well.
Okay. So, obviously, in case you were wondering, there are, of course, 4 short answers, all worth 10 marks. And usually they like to focus on one particular topic. If they can, they'll focus it on a specific dot point, but sometimes they do kind of branch out a little bit just because that specific dot point might not be, 10 marks worth of content, right? So they usually will go by topic and they will try to do one question from each topic. Now, this doesn't always happen, right? And that will be a consistent thing that we talk about. It's that don't expect your essays and your shorts to all just be one from each topic, right? But this year, I went with one from each topic for the shorts. My first choice, I went with free trade and protection. Now, hopefully you've watched some of our videos and you've realized that there is a currently very volatile state of affairs between the US and China, who are going through their own little trade war. And that's just been a really, really topical thing, this aspect of protection, right? Because for the past, 20, 30 years, we've been going that direction of trade liberalization. Now, all of a sudden, Donald Trump comes in and says, nope, let's go the protection route. So I think this was in last year as an essay question, right? But I think, it's pretty unlikely that they retest an essay. They will only really do that if the essay was done really, really poorly the year before, right?
I think and it's interesting because I think free trade and protection is going to be in the paper, but I don't think it's going to be a short answer.
Right, okay? Rowan, wait your turn.
Okay, cool. I'll let Terry continue and I'll throw some other wrinkles in.
Yeah. And so I think it's just going to be a short answer. Obviously, Rowan doesn't agree because I've seen the data. it was done pretty well last year. And so the next one I've got is from topic 2, the balance of payments, or something along balance of payments.
Maybe before you jump in, right, with the rest of them, I'd love to just come back and say, well, maybe some reasons why. I mean, I don't think it'll be a short answer because I think we have some agreement on some of the others, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to feature in the paper.
Yeah.
I think 100% it's going to feature somewhere because of what Terry said. It's so topical it really cannot almost not feature. My thing is that if you look at last year's paper, it was tested in quite an unusual way.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was tested around free trade and the conflict in objectives around distribution of income, external stability and employment. So it was more narrowly tested, okay, firstly. I think, secondly, the independent paper actually put free trade and protection as an essay, right? And so I sort of looked at it and stepped back, and I think I'm going to talk more about it as an essay. I'm not 100% convinced it's going to be an essay. I think it will be somewhere in the paper.
Yeah, I think we can both agree.
Yeah, on that. It's just, I had stronger opinions on some other topics for short answers, which I'll share afterwards. So I think you want to prep for it. I think clearly that's probably the message from this, right? It's just whether or not it's a short answer or it's maybe going to be squeezed into an essay is debatable. So, sorry, Terry, continue now with your other picks.
Okay, so the next one was just the balance of payments, external stability. And this one usually does feature every couple of years, right? And it's quite a good one to ask. So I think, I don't think there's going to be an essay on it. So a lot of these picks that I've had for shorts, a lot of them just come from the fact that I don't think there'll be an essay on it, but I still think it's significant enough that they'll want to feature it in the exam. And
I agree with Terry on this one, right? So this is where we share, the same opinion. To reinforce Terry's point, looking at the patterns since 2013, CAD, balance of payments, and external stability, pretty closely related, okay, has appeared in the paper in some way. Every paper, okay, it's appeared in some way. So I think that's why it's high probability to appear. And, again, definitely, I think given that, it was tested in 2018 as an essay, and it was a short answer in 2017, right? So if we think about it, it's tested every single year. The pattern suggests we see it as a short answer.
And last year as well, it was really horribly done, that essay question, right? The section 4, there was a choice between environment policies and current account, and everyone chose the current account external stability one, and they got absolutely smashed on it. So I really do feel like, there is definitely a rationale here to test it again, but possibly because there's just a lot going on in the essay world this year. I think it's definitely just going to slide in as a short answer.
And I think there's enough there as well with what's been happening with Australia's, trade surplus. There's enough happening that it also makes it quite relevant right now. We've got, surplus budget happening, that has some positive impacts as well, the twin deficits theory. So there's enough going on contextually that also would indicate that it's relevant again.
I think, even though we weren't really, by the time the paper was finalized, we weren't really in that, current account surplus just yet, right? But we were moving in that direction. So I feel like, there definitely would be a reason for that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so moving on to my last two, right? I've got environment, okay? Because I haven't seen an environment short answer in a while.
Since it's actually... Well, it's interesting because I also think environment's going to be there.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're in agreement on this. When I looked at the pattern since 2013 as well,
that was my year.
It's been featured somewhere across short answer or essays in every paper since 2013, right? So it's consistently coming up. I think the interesting thing is it was tested as an essay last year though. So it's like, it's going to be there, it's not going to be an essay. And what was your other one? You had
my last one was just labour market policies. Now, obviously, there has also been quite a bit of topical discussion about wage growth. I think last year there was definitely a short which was kind of built upon eco growth and wage growth. The first question last year.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And so,
but it wasn't explicitly labour market. It was a
bit sneaky that one.
Yeah, it was. It was.
And I will want to say this, right? Like, we've at least I've kind of assigned, big topics to this. But I think what I've kind of noticed since last year, the direction of these papers is kind of trending towards a little bit more of a grey area, a bit more mishmash, right? And so I wouldn't be surprised if, this is like the backbone. These topics that I'm suggesting are a backbone, but they will try to
connect it to something else. Yeah, and I think ultimately what that does is that economics is so interconnected. We look at everything ceteris paribus because it makes it easier for us to understand things, but ultimately, it is the interconnectivity between the topics and the ideas that is critical, and I think they're increasingly moving to that trend. And I think even the essay in 2018 where they looked at free trade and then conflict in multiple, and that was an essay.
That's never been done.
That was quite different in terms of the trend that we're seeing, I think, for the paper. So look, I think labour markets as well. The reason I also think about it is one of the most undertested parts of the course, right? So I looked at it. It was last tested as an essay in 2017. Okay, but then it featured in the 2014 and the 2011 papers, right? So the frequency has not been that high, right? It's been once every almost 3 years, give or take. So look, I think it's a really strong bet, given that we didn't see it as an essay in the 2018, and we saw it only, as you said, sneakily integrated in a short answer last year under unemployment and wage growth. So I think it's a pretty strong bet. Awesome. Is that your 4?
Yeah, that's my 4. So go over one more time. Free trade and protection, balance of payments, external stability, environment, as in topic 3, environment, so not focused on environment policies, and labour market policies.
Okay, awesome. And so I'm in agreement with CAD, balance of payments, environment, and labour market. Okay, but I have another pick, right, for short answer, and I think distribution of income and wealth is a strong candidate. Now, look, the reason I think this is, one, there was a lot going on this year around distribution of income and wealth. Okay, one, it connects to wage growth in a different way. We've had this wage growth issue in Australia. Two, I think though, with the budget this year, there was a lot of discussion with tax cuts and how it played out. Particularly even pre-budget in the election, distribution of income and wealth was one of the dominant economic issues that really people went to the or both parties went to the election on. So I think it was super topical. So that's the first part. From an analysis point of view, one of the things that sort of I looked at was, okay, it did appear a little bit in last year's paper, right? Remember that it was in the essay, there was an essay question which was free trade and the conflict and objectives, and it was snuck in the conflict of objectives. But it's fairly undertested as a result in terms of distribution of income and wealth. The independent paper also picked it as a short answer, for 2019. So I think it's not likely going to be an essay. Okay, I think it's quite possible that you're going to get it as a short answer, and that the tip would be most students ignore it. I just figure it's one of those chapters and areas of the course that it just feels, not that hard conceptually. I got my Lorenz curve done. And so, if you do look at this and take it on board as a prediction, I'd really encourage you to just go and get confident and get some data around the differences in income distribution across maybe gender, across age, across geographical location. So for different groups in the economy, because that's one that I think can appear and students often don't have anything on, and they just struggle with. So there you go. We've got 3 out of the 4 in agreement. Terry's picked free trade and protection, and which I agree is going to be in the paper somewhere, and I've picked distribution of income and wealth. Right. So either way, though, you've got 5 topics there to sort of work through for short answers. So hopefully that helps. But what do you think for short answers? Do you think we've got it right? Do you think it's free trade and protection, or do you think it's distribution of income and wealth? Remember, leave it in the comments below. Let us know which way you're leaning. Or is there a topic that just Terry and I have entirely missed? You've done your own analysis and you've gone, you know what, guys, you've missed the pattern. This is what it's going to be. Pop it in.
Yeah. Or your teachers said something, right?
Yeah.
Always open to other opinions.
That's right. Yeah. We're just taking a guess at it.
Yeah.
Right. An educated guess, hopefully. So now let's move into essays, right? This is the big area. Okay. Now, Terry, what's your picks for the essays?
So the first thing I want to just point out is my approach has been I treat section 3, which is question 25 and 26, a little bit differently to section 4, right? And because the section, if you're not familiar, hopefully you are familiar because you've done a trial on this. Section 3 is the one which you get a stimulus and you need to respond to in your essay. They'll give you some, the agency will give you some data or give you a quote or a graph. It'll give you something basically that you need to respond to. And so what I've gone through a little bit of an interesting flavor here. There's some things which I've noticed never get tested like if they're going to get tested as an essay, they've got to get tested in that section. As in, NESA wants to give you some data.
And there's things that have more data.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, right? So
Yeah,
you can, based on that, you can be a little bit sneaky and try to think about what would possibly be something which you can't really test without data. So what I've gone with is 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I've gone with macro policy, right? And I'm linking this to inflation because I saw that last year they focused mostly on growth, and as Rowan was saying, they were sneakily adding in some wage growth, right? But I think this year, instead of focusing on growth and wages, we might need to go more so just on the inflation side of things, and looking at the effectiveness of macro policy in addressing inflation, given that we have also had issues with inflation.
And it's a different way to look at it, because most of the time it's all about growth and how are we meeting the objectives. And so I think it also is going to be challenging because it's going to get students, it's going to get you to have to think about it from a different lens, right? Like the challenge of a low inflation rate environment, right? Which is, it's a little bit more challenging to think through and respond to.
Yeah. And just going back on what they were doing last year, right? It's all about testing about the new meta, so to speak, right? The new economy, right? Like what's happening these days, right? The things that are in our textbook are all of a sudden looking a little bit dated, right? Because we haven't had issues with low inflation, right? And we're just starting to think about that. So I think, there's a real rationale behind this to really get you guys to write an essay on it.
And I think that the policy response is super interesting, right? Because I think it's right. Like the principles are all there in your textbook. It's all there in the course, but it is always much more framed around how do we lower inflation, And so this is an interesting sort of situation to some extent to go, well, okay, how do you apply that in a different way? Which is why I think it's probable. I mean, I think that. So I agree with Terry. Like I picked it with. We both laughed when we saw this, right?
Because it's pretty specific.
Yeah, exact same thing, right? Like macro, because there was so much in the media, the interplay between Josh Frydenberg, Treasurer, and Governor Lau of the RBA. And what's the macro policy mix look like? And fiscal isn't lifting its load, so the RBA is doing all this jawboning. There's a lot of that was going on, right? So I think that helps just from a contextual point of view add sort of a bit of fire to it. But I think the thing for me is that inflation is sort of undertested, right? Like in recent years, like it was not examined at all in the 2018 paper, short of, the wage growth, but it was more unemployment focused there, okay? So it wasn't examined at all last year. It was in the 2017 paper. So we haven't seen it right last year, and it's a topical issue.
Yes.
Which, I think means that, we're likely to get it appearing here, just because there's been so much going on.
And one more thing just about inflation, going back to what I was saying earlier, it's about what they can give you. So as Rowan was saying, right, they can give you a juicy, Governor Lau quote. They can give you something. A lot of them. They can give you a nice little soundbite from Josh Frydenberg. Right? There's plenty of data, plenty of graphs, and that's what I'm saying. Like for this question, they have to give you a graph. And they will only test you on things which they can give you a graph or a quote on.
Now, the thing to be mindful of is when you're looking at this, though, with macro and inflation, it inevitably requires you to pull in some echo growth, and even because we're linking inflation to wage growth issues, right? And the fact that the Nairu's fallen, it's also going to most likely lead you to bring in a bit of that unemployment, right? In terms of the labour market. So it means that don't just take this and go narrowly look at inflation and the policies. You're going to have a more holistic look at it. Really, and
I think that just feeds into with the whole approach they're taking now. That whole interconnectedness. That's right. So if you go in, we really don't recommend you to just narrow it in, right? We want you guys to think of this as how are they all connected? Because that's what NESA wants us to think now.
That's right, definitely. Yeah. So then what's your second pick for the stimulus response?
Okay. The second pick for me has to be exchange rates. And I think we both agree on this one. First of all, there's always a juicy, exchange rate graph in there. Yeah. But also, as we've been alluding to this whole video, it's topical, right? The dollar has fallen.
Yeah, right? This entire year as well, right? So...
and it was falling before they finished the paper, and it's fallen since.
Yeah, right? It has,
and it's just topic 2, I feel, does get a little undertested as well. So my point was there's always a bias towards topic 4 in the essays.
Definitely.
And so I think, with last year how they did the current account, they probably don't want to. And like how we think it's going to be in the shorts. I think if they're going to go to topic 2, I think there has to be room for an exchange rate. So what was your analysis?
Yeah, look, so I 100% agree. So this is where we were both like cracking up.
Same thing, right?
Same too, yeah. Now, I think for me, what I looked at was definitely the undertested element of it. Okay, like it hasn't been an essay since 2013, right? So that's interesting because think about what was happening in 2013. Well, we just had a crazy high dollar. Okay, like it had just come off the back of parity with the USD. So there was a contextual thing going on there, right? The dollar hasn't been doing much since then until this year. So I think that's a strong reason. It's been undertested massively. I think the thing for me though is that the dollar leads into external stability a lot. External stability was tested as an essay component last year. So I actually think when they look at exchange rates this year, they may actually broaden it and get you again in the theme of trying to connect more in, right? It may be more looking at, how does fluctuations or whatever, or sustained depreciation if they want to be really precise. Okay, what's the overall impact on the economy, which will inevitably get you to bring in some of that external stability, current account stuff. But I think they're wanting you to push it beyond that. So that's just I think exchange rates. But I'm curious if they're going to try to pull in some other areas, right, and maybe bring in some of topic 3.
Yeah, so I've looked. So Rowan's kind of going along the impacts on the economy route. I'm also just had a thought just then. I think they might go down very similar to what they did last year with the free trade, linking it to economic objectives
and like conflicts in those objectives. Yeah. And so then now we move on to the final 2 essays, right? So
let's go with the one we agree on first.
Okay, and then we'll end with the big disagreement, right?
Okay. So the next one I had this is section 4, right? You don't need, because NASA's not giving you any stimulus. They don't need any data to test this. I've just got something on unemployment, right? And just going back to what Rowan was saying earlier, it's undertested, right? It hasn't popped up in a while. Usually there is a topic 3 essay question. Right. Last year there wasn't specifically, but they had the whole eco objectives.
They integrated it. Yeah, that's right.
So I think, of course, again going the topical route, right? It's the same thing, undertested topical route, right? We've had issues talking about the spare capacity in the labour force, right? And it's just been a huge part of all the policy decisions as well.
And I think with that, just so I agree. I've got maybe a slight little flavour where they might bring something in on it. Okay. Just to give a little bit more data to the undertested piece, right? When I looked at it, what I found was that it was tested as short answer in 2018 and 2017. It was an essay last in 2016, right? So there's been a couple of year gap of it appearing as an essay, and it's topical, right? So it's this undertested, as Terry said, right on those 2. The other thing that I found though was that unemployment has featured in every HSC in some way since 2009. Crazy, right? So we know it's going to be in the paper, and given that it's been a short answer the last sort of 2 years, really strongly suggests we're going to get it as an essay question this year. I think the big thing for me as well here is that it has been a topical issue, but it's been topical from a point, yes, of the Nauru and spare capacity, but also from the perspective of to what extent is this a structural problem? Okay, and so one of the thoughts that I have is that, we did say we think labour market policies will appear as a short answer. And I'm confident, that I think, we're both fairly confident that's the outcome. If they're going to be really creative and sneaky, because honestly, unemployment on its own is not a challenging question. Okay, typically, right? In terms of, causes, impacts, it's unlikely to, maybe government response sort of thing. It's not challenging unless you bring in micro. Okay, because I find that a lot of students struggle with micro. It's you learn it at the tail end of the course. I find a lot of people find it boring. I personally think it's really interesting, but I'm an eco nerd, so is Terry. So hey, so I think there is a possibility that they might bring it in as a little bit of micro as part of it. Okay, and I think for that, it appears micro tends to appear every 2 years as an essay question. It wasn't examined last year as an essay. It was examined as a short answer, which makes me think that there's a possibility, right, that we might see that come in, right? Maybe. That's just, I think, unemployment, but it's maybe a little mix.
Yeah. So, that's where we kind of diverge on this. I just think that they're going to split the 2. They're just going to go unemployment for 1 essay and micro reform for the other essay.
So that was your final pick?
That was my final. So we, in a way, we are still kind of agreeing.
Saying like, we think it's going to appear,
but it's just that,
different ways.
I think it's just going to be its own 20 marker and its own 20 marker, whereas Rowan thinks they might kind of try and bring the two together.
Possibly.
Yeah.
So did you have any other rationale for why micro is an essay?
Well, it's the same thing, which is the whole undertested component, and that it's something which historically is not done very, very well by students. And so there is definitely an incentive for Nesta to go, hey, let's be nasty and let's test them on it.
That's right. And I think, to be honest, it's also though something for you to be mindful of, given that everyone does poorly at it. If you get your head around it and nail it, right, like, you're going to stand out so much more. So, you can be a little strategic, okay, but it's hard to nail, right, because a lot of students struggle with it. So my final pick was a global economy, right, because I think if we think about our picks right now, so far global economy has been very missing, very MIA, right? If we go back to our short answers, short of maybe the influence of the global economy through the current account, okay, we haven't picked anything. If we look at exchange rates, well, maybe that's where there's a bit of global economy coming in, but it's not explicit. So for me, right, this is a little bit of a tricky one, and I am a little torn about this because I think there's a likelihood of a global economy with a free trade protection in here. Now remember, Terry picked free trade protection for shorts, and we both agree we think it's going to be in the paper. I just think it's going to form potentially in the paper linked to the global economy in an essay. And it's tricky because I think one, if we look at it, free trade was examined as an essay with the conflict of objectives last year. So I'm mindful that I might be too, if we're going on trends, right? Like it's questionable. And so I'm mindful of that. In saying that, the focus on free trade and protection last year was very much on the domestic economy, rather than looking at the global economy. And I really feel there's going to be some element in this exam for global economy because of the huge geopolitical movements that have been happening around the world. Obviously the China-US trade and technology dispute, is the big one, but Brexit, and the ramifications of Brexit has also been really big. And since then, there's been ongoing things. So I think there's got to be something global, right? I feel that it's also somewhat undertested, okay? So if I look at it, globalization as a topic hasn't been tested as an essay in 2018. It was tested as a case study in 2017, okay? And it does appear fairly frequently, globalization in some form. So I think it's going to appear. It was a short answer last year, which makes me think it's going to be an essay this year. So in summary, for the essays, just remind me, what's your pick, Terry?
Section 3, macro policy with inflation, and we both agree on that.
Yep.
Exchange rates, and we both agree on that.
Yep.
So we'll go for section 3. Section 4, I'm going with micro reform and unemployment as my two picks. But Rowan, you're combining the two.
I'm combining, micro. I think it'll be an unemployment focus, but there may be some micro. And then my pick is I feel like there's going to be something to do with the global economy. And my feeling is potentially to do with free trade protection. They may get sneaky and they may link that to categories of development, right, and the impact on it. But I think global economy is my pick. So there you have it, guys. There are our predictions. And look, there's a lot of overlap, but there is some disagreement in here. What we'd love to hear is, what do you think, right? Do you agree with Terry's picks, for the short answer and multis, particularly where we disagree? Do you agree with my picks for the short answer? Sorry, not the multis. For the short answer and essays, we're definitely not attempting multis.
Maybe next year.
Not this year. Let us know if you think there's another topic. Like, as Terry said, if your teacher is like, they've done this analysis as well, and they've come up with something like brilliant that that we just clearly haven't seen. We'd love to hear it. So leave it in the comments below. Definitely, just as a disclaimer, right? As the final part of it, right? What we don't want you to do is go, well, okay, look, Rowan and Terry, this HSC Economic review, guys, they said all I needed to study was these topics, and I would nail the exam. I want to be clear, we are not saying that. What we're trying to do, though, is give you a sense of, what some likely topics are. So if you're going to focus your study and do some more work, maybe these are some areas that you could focus on.
You can start on it, right?
That's right.
It's a start.
Definitely. Ultimately, though, we are not responsible for your marks if you only focus on these and none of these topics are in the exam. Awesome. So, look, if you have any questions as well, leave it below, guys. I think that the main thing is all the best, right?
Yeah, you've made it all away. 4 months of Year 12 Echo. Like, you've done well. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's right. So all the best, and we'll see you with one final. We're going to have more reviews, but one final HSC focused one will be coming just before your exams with a stats update. So you don't want to miss that one.
See you around.
See you guys.